I always say Gordon's is a story of recovery, mine is a story of surrender. And my identity is different today. And slowly but surely I feel certain parts of my life coming back. But I had to be okay with giving up pretty much everything. I could have fought it and made it even worse. But it was, and it's a process. It's not something you wake up one day and say, I'm just going to let everything go. It doesn't work that way. At least it didn't for me. It was a process. It's a whole process of mourning. And not only are you mourning the loss, you know, your husband is in bad shape. You know, I literally walked around my house and said goodbye to everything we owned. I was sure it was all going to disappear. I'm sorry, it's still a terrible moment. But once I was able to make peace with it, it was better. But I think clinging to the thought that you can have that normal life again is torture. The answer, every stroke is different. You kind of want to strangle them after the 50th time you've heard that. But on the other hand, it also said there was no limit. But it took a while to get to feel this side of the scale. At first, you just want something. Someone say something that says, you have an opportunity here. But those words are never said. What's not said in the beginning is I took very personally. What you're really not saying to me is that my husband is never going to get better. So I would hear things like, if you don't have it back in a year, probably not going to get it back. Then you might hear from someone else, if you don't have it back in 2 years, probably not going to get it back. And then other therapists would say, you never know when he's going to stop getting better. This might be all you get. So these things will haunt you. And really, now we're 4.5 years into it, and he is continuing to improve. It was at the 4-year mark that he started being able to open his hand. And we're still working on it. It's not particularly organized yet, but it's opening. And we would have thought, if we'd believed sort of these kind of guidelines, we would have quit 2.5 years ago. 2.5 years ago, he could put 3 words together, and that was it. So we had to chart our own course. But I had to have the fact that, well, I'll get to you in just a second, the neurosurgeon that said, those who want it most recover best, we just had to remember that one. There's no right answer, and I know, and I see at this point, because I can weigh both sides of the scales, I can see why you don't say anything, and I almost wish there was like just anecdotal. You say, you know what? These are just anecdotal answers to different people's progress. And maybe there's a way to put something like that together. What did they do? What did they have? What did they do? And what does their outcome look like? Just a framework, something, anything. That woman, Jill Bolte Taylor, who wrote the book, My Stroke of Insight, someone gave me that book. And her stroke wasn't as bad as Gordon's. And she wrote that she took 8 years to get better. Well, that made me feel better. This 2-year deadline looming out there all of a sudden didn't mean anything to me anymore. Well, Gordon was self-employed. There was no company around us. And I find just that fact, you don't fit in a lot of boxes that are sort of outlined, because the assumption in every form I fill out, of which, believe me, there's a lot of forms, always this assumption that you have employer-sponsored health insurance. And when you don't fit in the boxes, and it's very difficult. Now, because we were self-employed, we didn't have any fancy health insurance plan either. We had a high deductible health plan, and we had a health insurance, a health savings account that we would put our money in, you know, to cover the deductible. I mean, we were handling it all ourselves. I was basically our benefits administrator. Not a fun job. They worked with us in a way that we could just pay for our therapy appointments out of our pocket. We go once a month because it's expensive. So you go once a month, they give me a bunch of exercises to do, and then we go home and do them. So I've learned more than I ever wanted to know about therapy. I'm sure you know how that is. But the good thing is because we've approached therapy always as a team, because, I mean, in the beginning, his scrambled brain, he doesn't even know who he is. How in the world could he possibly do those exercises? You couldn't. So we have been a team from day one on that. And I think at our peak, we were spending 5 hours a day on therapy. And after a while, you get a little burned out and you have to come up with new things to do, and you have to back off that time a little bit because it just gets to be too much. But we've always done it as a team, and it's really just been in the last 6 or 8 months, I think it is. Gordon has taken over all responsibility for his own exercises and therapy, but we still do it. Or he now still does it. We are still working on that recovery. As soon as we got to the emergency room, I called one of my very closest friends who is a PhD in public health. And she zipped down to that hospital and she sat with me and helped me through this. Now, not very many people have that opportunity. So I had an expert sitting next to me who understood a whole lot of those words that I didn't get. And so it was very comforting to me to have someone who could just be there with me and who knew something. And just sort of further down the road, just to say, explain just really how incredibly fortunate we have been. Another woman in our community who we'd just sort of known just through school. Gordon and I have always done a lot of volunteering at the elementary school and different areas of the community. A woman rang called me on the phone, who I had chatted with her at the school and stuff. And she was a doctor. She had retired a year before. And she said, if you would like to have a personal doctor, I'd like to volunteer and come alongside you and be with you through this process. So we had a personal doctor, and she had been a doctor at Good Sam, where Gordon was 3 weeks in rehab. She went to me, they do those big round table where you have 13 or 14 professionals and you have 15 minutes. She came with me through all of those. She would come over to the house. She would help explain all the medications to me. How many people get to have that? I mean, it was really amazing. So our community was incredible. So our friend Joyce was, and of course now we're the closest of friends, but that was just a sweet person in the community that helped me.